Hi, I'm your host, Alex Franca, and today my friend Priscilla is back and we are discussing In the Dream House by Carmen Maria Machado. Before we get into today's episode, I just want to share one more review from Apple Podcasts. And if you write a positive review on Apple Podcasts, I'll share it here on the show. This one is from Big Ginny 73 and it's titled A Breath of Fresh Air. This is such a lovely podcast. Alex Franca has the unique ability to review a book while keeping us entertained by talking about her own life experiences, and she does so magnificently. I'm so glad I found this wonderful, thought-provoking, and unique podcast and cannot wait for more episodes. Thank you, Big Ginny. I can't wait to bring you more episodes. Let's get into this one. Hi, Priscilla.
Hey, Alex.
Thanks for coming back. And wow, I gave you another memoir that was not written very traditionally. I don't read the memoirs necessarily before I pair them up with my guests. And I knew that this was a good memoir. But yeah, when I opened it up and I saw how it was written, I was like, oh, I am picking her to read these just different ones, I guess. Promise the next one will be a little bit more traditional, I guess is a good word for it. Thanks for always just going on the journey with me, P. I appreciate you.
You know it.
What did you think about In the Dream House?
I actually really enjoyed it. It was very depressing. I feel like most of these memoirs are very traumatic. So it was a little difficult to read some of it, but I wasn't too bothered by the format of her writing. It actually was kind of nice to be able to have a lot of places to break up and take a pause, especially when it started getting really heavy. But I thought she did a very great job in just imagery and was very, very descriptive in everything. So I enjoyed it.
I think she's a fantastic writer. It's extremely well written and in so many different interesting ways, which we'll get further into as well. And I think that it documents a much needed account of domestic abuse and lesbian relationships. And it's a poignant, heartbreaking, and at times surprisingly funny and tongue in cheek coming of age story about a woman defining her story and herself to herself. I feel like it's really important to define yourself to yourself because so often we allow other people to define us, to put us into boxes, to tell us the type of people that we are. And I think that this memoir was Carmen's necessary reflection on who she sees herself as opposed to who other people saw her as.
This memoir is really about how one defines themselves within another person. And Carmen writes about an ex-lover, and she refers to this person as her dream house, her home. And throughout the entire memoir, it is about her redefining herself outside of this dream home as it rooted her very much in who she was for so long.
Yeah. And I think it's also about creating what she thought was a dream life because
Mm-hmm.
she refers to her ex lover, her ex girlfriend, as the woman in the dream house. So she very much, like you said, is her home, is who she's defining herself with. And then also, there is a physical home that very much gets tainted by the abuse in the relationship. And each chapter in the book is the two words dream house as different tropes. So there's dream house as haunted house, there's dream house as romance novel, dream house as deja vu, etc. All these different narrative structures and genres that Carmen uses to get her story across in all the ways that she can. She writes, I broke the stories down because I was breaking down and didn't know what else to do. Chapters are very short. Some of them are just a page, some of them are half a page, just a few sentences. So it is really easy to kind of pick up and put back down.
I mean, I think that that's honestly probably the most powerful part of this memoir is the way that just the structure of how she wrote everything surrounded by this idea of a dream house. We always say like home is where the heart is, and we kind of put it to a place, to a person. What happens when our heart is no longer in that place or with that person? And that's kind of what she explores, obviously through traumatic experiences. But I think that that was why it was so powerful to me, is it just created this imagery for all of us to really relate to quite easily. And even if we didn't go through such traumatic events like she did, we all understand when our sense of home shifts or our sense of self begins to shift. What does that look like and how do we evolve?
Yeah. What happens when the dream becomes a nightmare? I especially loved the choose your own adventure part, where no matter what you chose, you were always wrong. And that's exactly what she was experiencing with Dreamhouse. She could do
Yeah,
nothing right. I mean, it was such a genius way of
that
putting
was
us
very,
in
very
her shoes.
unique.
It was so cool.
Yeah.
Okay, let's get into it. So it was published in 2019, and this is her dedication. If you need this book, it is for you, which is a lovely dedication. All right, so I like to start with our quick topics, and there were lots of new words in this memoir for me. What about for you?
I don't feel like I noticed it.
I have 11, but I'll just pick my favorites. Picara, that is a woman who is a rogue or a vagabond. Ennui, a feeling of utter weariness or discontent, boredom. And Zaftig, well-bodied, specifically of a woman having a pleasantly plump figure. Yeah, there are definitely quite a few words that I had to stop and underline so that I could go back and look them up later. Most of the time, you could, with context clues, figure out what she was saying, but I always enjoy learning a new word. Clearly, she has a bomb ass vocabulary.
What was the first one again?
Picara,
I like that
or
one.
picara, maybe a woman who is a rogue or a vagabond. Yeah. So throughout our episode today, I'm going to refer to Carmen's ex-girlfriend as Dreamhouse. Carmen doesn't name her in the memoir. She calls her Dreamhouse woman. I'm just going to call her Dreamhouse for the sake of clarity, right? She never names her.
No, she
Yeah.
doesn't.
Like we've already discussed, she writes this memoir in a very non-traditional way. She switches from first person, second person, third person point of view throughout the memoir. And she writes in first person when she's talking about her history, her childhood, giving us a background of why she became who she is, why she thinks she became the type of woman that this traumatic event happened to, because that's a big question that she has throughout the memoir. Why me? What was it about me? Could I have seen this coming, etc. She switches to second person point of view, which is you. She's literally putting us in her shoes. So anytime that she is writing about the time that Carmen was in the relationship with Dreamhouse, all of that is in second person. I think she's almost talking to her younger self, talking to the reflection in the mirror, maybe.
Yeah.
I just want to set that up because as I start to read some of the quotes, even in the quick topics, it can get a little confusing, but we'll still be able to get down to like the meat of what everything is about. Okay, so the second quick topic, Carmen writes this. One of the questions that has haunted you, would knowing have made you dumber or smarter? If one day a milky portal had opened up in your bedroom and an older version of yourself had stepped out and told you what you know now, would you have listened? Carmen acknowledges that she'd like to think she'd listen, but she probably wouldn't since she didn't listen to any of her concerned friends at the time. If future Priscilla came and told you, don't do this, don't do that because it will lead to this, would you listen to her? Or would you be like, no, I can make better decisions than you? It's another trippy thing to think about.
Well, I think that that's why her saying that under these circumstances is very unique because it's not a general question. You can't just ask yourself, but when it deals with love, that is something very, very different. Someone telling you, like, get out of this relationship, someone telling you, like, this is not healthy, this is toxic. Sure, in hindsight, you can say, like, man, I should have listened to that person. But in the moment, like, love is such a powerful thing. And I think that that's the whole thing with her here. And that, that's the whole thing with Carmen. She was in a very toxic relationship. And I think throughout her journey, she started realizing it. But the question is, how do you get out when you still love this person? When you believe that this person to the core is a good person, they're just doing bad things. And I think that's the question, is like, because like she said, if someone came and was like, don't do this, get out of it, she probably wouldn't listen. And why? Like I think a lot of people, when you're in love, it's really hard to see. You are seeing everything through rose-colored glass. Like it's just, but I think if it was a different circumstance, obviously, like, don't take this job. It's not you know what I mean? Like different circumstances are much easier, I think, to listen to or not listen to. But I feel like love is such a complex emotion feeling to go through, and listen to anyone outside of that, which is, it's kind of hard to talk about because we haven't really gone through what she's gone through to get to be like in this relationship, like why this relationship is so sacred to her to begin with.
Mm-hmm. Okay, next quick topic. So, like I said earlier, she names each of her chapters Dream House as. This is Dream House as Haunted Mansion. Carmen ponders on the energy left in the house that she shared with her abusive ex girlfriend. She likens the house to a haunted house, like we talked about. She writes, you were the sudden, inadvertent occupant of a place where bad things had happened. And then it occurs to you one day, standing in the living room, that you are this house's ghost. After all, you don't need to die to leave a mark of psychic pain. If anyone is living in the dream house now, he or she might see an echo of you.
So good. It's
So
so
good.
good.
So good.
There were so many times where I was just blown away by what she's saying. It's so deep, yet simply stated. I'm like, damn, man, she's good.
Do you believe in ghosts? Bad or good energy remaining? Could you move into a house where something really bad had happened?
I do believe in ghosts. I would rather believe in it than not believe in it.
Just in case.
And exactly, just in case. And 100% without
Why
a
do
doubt,
you
I
feel
would.
like they don't haunt you if you believe in them?
No, I just would rather be like careful than sorry. Like, I don't want to live like obliviously, like, oh, they're not here. And then something happens where it's like, okay, how could they not be here? You know?
Mhm.
I mean, I just feel like we could say ghost, but it's energy. I mean, it's
Energy.
got to be somewhere. So I do genuinely believe in it. And 100% without a doubt, I would never move into a home where something awful has happened. It's actually a great fear of mine. Like, I need to know if anyone has died in this house, why. In California laws, they don't have to disclose
They
unless you
don't?
unless you ask, then they'll tell you. And they also only need to tell you up to like certain amount of years. I can't remember if it's like 7 or 10 years or something. And I'm like, what? These houses are built like from the 30s. I need to
Mm-hmm.
know way past then. So I actually was doing quite a bit of research to see. Sometimes you just walk in and you get this bad vibe, bad aura, and I'm like, okay, did something happen here? I mean, it's your home. You need to have good energy. Would you move in to a place where someone got killed?
No, and I agree with you. I do think energy remains. I feel like that's part of the thing that people feel when they go on house hunting tours or apartment tours. You walk into a space and it just like the energy feels right. I think obviously people look for layout and design and all that stuff too, but you can walk into a beautiful home and it just doesn't feel like home.
I think that like my realtor was probably really annoyed with me because I leaned on that a lot. It was just like, I don't know, it feels a little scary or I'm just having a bad vibe. So like poor guy just had
How can you?
stats. Yeah, like it's like I can't figure that out for you. But it's like, yeah, I'm just not feeling this place. Like something around that corner is a little scary for me. So
I know people who sage all of their new places before they kind of move in and just kind of let the bad energy dissipate and all that stuff.
oh yeah. I mean,
That's
my
good.
parents had a brand new home built and they still had a priest come and like do like a blessing. They had my uncle come and like do like a little blessing and like feng shui stuff. It's like really, really important for them.
I did not know that. I love that. Okay, last quick topic. And this was really interesting. So Carmen writes about Amy Mann's hit song, Voices Carry, which very explicitly depicts verbal and psychological abuse in the music video, which is a very 80s music video. I don't know if you got curious and watched it during this section, but I did. I paused it and I watched it. It's very 80s. This song originally had female pronouns. In 1999, the song's producer admits that he didn't think it was that big of a deal to change the gender of the love interest, as, quote, nothing social was to be gained. Carmen quotes more of the interview. Would a quasi lesbian song have had any effect on the liberation of such homosexuals? I don't think so. Better to pull them in subversively, as the best pop music does. How many more people are now sympathetic to gay people's issues because they responded to gay artists who didn't obviously fly the flag but expressed universal human sentiments that appealed to all? We respond to a song's humanity first, and that is what matters. So basically, Amy Mann, she had written this song, potentially or partially written this song. It is about an abusive relationship, and in it, she was singing about another woman. And
Mm.
the producer came in, or the record label came in, whomever came in and said, we like the song, but we're not going to have a girl singing about being in a relationship with another girl. We're going to change all the pronouns to he. And this was kind of his explanation of it, was that if we had kept the pronouns the way that Amy had originally written the song, or the way that the song was originally, it wouldn't have had the social impact that it did, because potentially people would have been turned off by the same sex relationship that was being depicted in the song. I think that's kind of the point that Carmen makes throughout the book, is that by not acknowledging that these types of relationships existed, specifically abusive lesbian relationships, then we're basically negating the entire thing. And this guy,
Right.
the producer, is saying that we're actually making a more of a social impact because we're getting the conversation going.
What it sounds like is there's two people with two different goals. is Hollywood right that it's going to reach more ears and be more relatable and have a bigger impact in terms of numbers of people and numbers of dollars? Yeah, that it's true. But I think it depends on what your goal is. And it's the same with any topic. People, if they're not against it, it's like you do you, but I don't need to necessarily see it or hear it. So I think Carmen is right. It's like when it's not brought to light, you forget that these situations even exist. But I think ultimately it is like, what is your goal? I don't know if that song would have been a huge hit then. Who knows? Like, I don't know.
That's true. And I think that that's something that Carmen is grappling with in a major way throughout her memoir. And we're going to talk a little bit more about it right after the quick topics. And I know I kind of already hinted at it, but the invisibility of domestic abuse, specifically in lesbian relationships. To me, it very much felt like this was one of the reasons why she felt she got so sucked into this toxic relationship, because it hadn't been talked about and it wasn't normalized. And so it didn't feel like it was something that she could relate to other people about. And she felt very isolated and alone and lonely, instead of feeling like she could draw on strength of others and their convictions and talking about their own experiences with domestic abuse within a homosexual relationship.
Yeah, there's a lot of depth to that because it's not just about it's not being brought up. I think the biggest thing is like, why is it not being brought up? And there's just so many different reasons for it within particularly the same-sex relationships. I think this is probably what I learned most is I did not know anything about domestic violence with same-sex relationships. I actually brought it up to my sister who used to work for CPS, and she was like, oh yeah, when you deal with DV, they say make sure you are extra careful and looking for signs when it comes to same-sex relationships, because statistically there is more domestic violence within those relationships. I had no idea.
Hi, I'm popping in here to add statistics. This is from dcvlp.org. It's the DC Volunteer Lawyers Project. And the statistics that they provide are according to the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence and the Williams Institute of Law. Black and African American members of the LGBTQIA plus community are more likely to experience physical violence. Around 44% of lesbian and 61% of bisexual women have experienced forms of rape and physical violence by an intimate partner, as compared to 35% of straight women. 26% of gay men and 37% of bisexual men have experienced forms of rape and physical violence by an intimate partner, compared to 29% of straight men. Lifetime intimate partner violence among the transgender community from studies ranges from 31% to 50%. Okay, back to the episode.
So I thought that was probably the most impactful thing. If there's any takeaway from this book, it's that, because it launched me into doing all this other research and why it's not being talked about, what could make it, there's a lot there. I'm very glad that Carmen had the strength to really share this very dark story of hers and bring to light something that isn't talked about often.
Yeah, I think this book hopefully starts very important conversations and help people realize that same-sex relationships can have domestic violence, physical, mental, psychological, verbal abuse, just like heterosexual relationships can have. Being a lesbian or being a gay person does not make you a saint. And that's a big thing that she pushes against in this book too. And we are going to get into that. Let's dive deeper. Carmen sets the scene. She talks about her own parents' toxic relationship and how there was very little communication. And you and I have spoken before about the examples that we have as children are our parents and their relationship and the way that they interact with each other, the way that they interact with the world. That's our first example as children of how to view the world, how to go through the world, how to relate to the world, how to communicate, etc. So Carmen sets this up. And then she also talks about realizing that she is interested in women. And her initial reaction to that is that that is a very bad thing and that she is a very bad person for doing that. And I think when you talked earlier about how there's a weight to this relationship with Dreamhouse because of the way that she is looking for love, looking for belonging, looking for connection. And Carmen writes about a time when she's on a drive with her scary aunt, she calls her, and her mother after her grandmother passes. Carmen writes, "Your scary aunt said, apropos of nothing, I don't believe in gay people. And from the back seat, empowered by adulthood, you said, well, we believe in you. Your mother said nothing at all." And she writes this: heterosexuals have never known what to do with queer people, if they think about their existence at all. This has especially been the case for women. On the one hand, they seem like sinners in theory, but with no penis, how do they, do it? This confusion has taken many forms, including the flat out denial that sex between women is even possible. She references a lot of other works to really strengthen one of her big arguments, which is that there has been literally no depiction of abusive lesbian relationships in narrative media history. She writes, in an essay about Joan Russ's How to Suppress Women's Writing, Lee Mandel calls women's literary history, quote, written on sand. I can't think of a more apt metaphor for the process of writing this book, which relied on finding texts that talked about queer people and domestic abuse, two topics that have historically been hidden away or rarely talked about. So I wanted to share a few of those examples today, and then we'll get into Carmen's story. Carmen writes, in her essay, Venus in Two Acts, on the dearth of contemporaneous African accounts of slavery, Saidiya Hartman talks about the violence of the archive. This concept, also called archival silence, illustrates a difficult truth. Sometimes stories are destroyed, and sometimes they are never uttered in the first place. Either way, something very large is irrevocably missing from our collective histories. I remember when I read that quote, and it just made me reflect that history is written by the victors, number one, and history has consistently been written by men.
Yeah.
And it's been their perspectives and their experiences and the things that they have deemed important, which is kind of partly why I did this podcast to begin with, because I believe in the power of women's voices. And I think we live in a very special time where a lot of women are finding strength in their own voice and having the courage, like Carmen, to come out and tell these really hard stories. And we're getting vulnerable with each other, and we're getting honest with each other, and we're finding strength in one another. Okay, let's continue. Carmen also writes, the late queer theorist Jose Esteban Munoz pointed out that queerness has an especially vexed relationship to evidence. When the historian of queer experience attempts to document a queer past, there's often a gatekeeper representing a straight person. What gets left behind? Gaps where people never see themselves or find information about themselves. Holes that make it impossible to give oneself a context. Crevices people fall into. Impenetrable silence. Because Carmen doesn't see herself reflected in history, she doesn't know where to place herself contextually. She continues in a later part of her memoir, the abused woman has certainly been around for as long as human beings have been capable of psychological manipulation and interpersonal violence. But as a generally understood concept, it and she did not exist until about 50 years ago. The conversation about domestic abuse within queer communities is even newer and even more shadowed. As we consider the forms intimate violence takes today, each new concept, the male victim, the female perpetrator, queer abusers, the queer abused, reveals itself as another ghost that has always been there, haunting the ruler's house. She writes about Annette Green. Do you remember the story, P? Who in 1989 shot and killed her abusive female partner in West Palm Beach? Carmen writes, Green was one of the first queer people to use battered woman syndrome to justify her crime. The baffled judge allowed Green's defense, but only after insisting on renaming it battered person syndrome, despite the fact that both the abuser and the abused were women. Regardless, it was not successful. Green was convicted of second-degree murder. All of this contrasts sharply with the way narratives of abused straight and usually white women play out.
I mean, that really stuck out to me because that was such a learning moment for me. Correct me if I'm wrong, because this is how I received the information as I read it. But from my understanding of that, Annette filed, in a sense, like a battered woman self-defense, pretty much. And the ruling was that she still got second-degree murder because when it is a woman and another woman, they have a hard time seeing how it's self-defense, because if it's a man overpowering a woman, there's strength there and they can understand that. But with another woman, all of a sudden now they're looking at it from an even playing field. So I thought that was so interesting because I never thought of it that way. And it's so interesting to see how the laws and vocabulary isn't even built or developed enough to protect women from this. Like, they're not even thinking it. Like, literally, you just think battered woman. Okay, a man is stronger than a woman, then yes, self-defense, easy. But just because it's another woman, all of a sudden, that is completely questioned now. I tried to look and I maybe I should have tried harder, because I was actually really curious about this case, because self-defense against a murder, like you have to prove that your life was physically threatened in that circumstance, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So I
That
think
makes
that
sense.
that's why that's so difficult in the court of law. How do you define battered woman?
Mm-hmm.
And that was just so interesting to me, because I think a woman could be just as overpowering as a man could be. And, there's bias on both ends. A woman could be stronger than the man.
Yeah, it is really interesting. The part about all of that that stuck out to me was that the judge didn't want her to call herself battered woman, but a battered
Yeah.
person.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, wait, what, why? What did
Yeah.
that do?
I mean, exactly though. And I think that that's the whole thing, is that they're trying to change jargon and vocabulary because it's a concept that people have a hard time grappling with. And at the end of the day, if you really think about it, whether or not you can pretend we live in a world where the court of law is unbiased, but realistically, when you're talking about, a same-sex relationship, there very well could be people that are biased and aren't treating this based on just facts.
She also writes about the Framingham Eight, a group of women in prison for killing their abusive partners, and they came into the public eye in 1992. Carmen writes, people were similarly uncertain what to do with Deborah Reed, a Black woman and the only lesbian among them. Deborah's lawyers did their best to leverage the committee's inherent assumptions and prejudices by painting her as the woman in a traditional sense. Deborah was finally paroled in 1994, the second to last member of the group to do so. An ABC primetime report about them barely talked to or about Deborah compared to the other women, and the Academy Award-winning short documentary about the Framingham Eight didn't include Deborah at all.
Wow, yeah.
She had to tell this story. She had to write this story down and have it be a part of our collective history.
That was probably one of my favorite parts of her memoir, is her bringing in very specific cases and examples of how this is so deeply rooted. This isn't just like you and me not even knowing about these things and not talking about it. It's like it is so not talked about that this isn't even written into law. There's not even vocabulary created to help protect this community,
Mm-hmm,
and I think
mm-hmm.
that was just, it kind of blew my mind. I was like, wow, it's one thing to talk about why they are marginalized and if there's domestic violence within same-sex marriage, but it was a whole nother thing where it's like, man, it's so deeply rooted and it can go so much further. What if this happens and it goes to court and you're not even protected by law there? It's like, gosh, you would like to think that, okay, like if someone's a threat, it doesn't matter if it's a woman on woman or a woman on man, it just is what it is. But apparently it's not.
And it just adds to that feeling of hopelessness and helplessness and that feeling of being stuck and not knowing what to do when you're
I
in that
wonder.
situation yourself. Like you don't really feel like there's someone who's going to take you seriously or even as simple as believe you.
Yeah, that's the thing, is it took, I don't know the full extent. I'm sure nobody knows the extent except those two people, but I'm sure it took some bravery to do what she had to do to whether defend herself or maybe it wasn't. Like who knows, but
Oh, you're
it
talking about
takes,
Annette Green? Mm-hmm.
yeah, I mean it takes so much to come forward, to act, to speak up, that for it to fall on deaf ears is really hopeless. And I mean, I think it's beyond hopeless. I think that that's why there's silence. It's not worth it. It's not, why make noise, and why put yourself in a vulnerable position when you believe you're not even going to be heard. And I think that that's the root of why not a lot of people speak up about same-sex domestic violence.
Yeah, I think also there's a sense kind of similar to Joy Harjo's book where you have to protect your community. And there's a sense of like having to have lesbian relationships and queer relationships have good PR, as Carmen even says. Carmen writes this: the desire to save face, to present a narrative of uniform normality, can defeat every other interest. And I was like, wow, is that exactly what Joy Harjo said or what?
Yeah,
Again, just the connectedness of women.
I feel like that's one of the loudest statements, truly, is you're talking about a marginalized group who is suffering, but they fear speaking up because they don't want the stigmatization, and they don't want like further oppression and even further social marginalization. Like it's just, if anything, they need to speak so loudly, but it's like, what do you
Yeah, but I
Um,
mean, I feel like Carmen really is writing out against that very idea. She writes, even the enduring symbol of queerness, the rainbow, is a promise not to repeat the act of supreme violence by a capricious and rageful God. Acknowledging the insufficiency of this idealism is nearly as painful as acknowledging that we're the same as straight folks in this regard. We're in the muck like everyone else. All this fantasy is an act of supreme optimism. Or if you're feeling less charitable, arrogance. Maybe this will change someday. Maybe when queerness is so normal and accepted that finding it will feel less like entering paradise and more like the claiming of your own body, imperfect, but yours.
she's speaking of an experience that she had where she was silent. In going through that trauma is where she learns and wants to do the opposite,
Yeah.
speaking out and being loud because she experienced what it's like to not.
Yeah.
It took her being in a very toxic relationship and not even just being in it, but coming out of it
Mm-hmm.
to find the courage and the bravery to speak up and to stand for speaking up in a sense.
Yeah. Let's get to Carmen's story. She meets Dreamhouse at a mutual friend's. She writes, your female crushes were always floating past you, out of reach, but she touches your arm and looks directly at you, and you feel like a child buying something with her own money for the first time. Oh, it's such a beautiful way to encapsulate that first spark, you know?
Mhm. It's a wonderful feeling.
It really is.
That's the thing. I mean, she puts it into words so well. Like I can't put into words that feeling.
Yeah. She also writes about not understanding why people would be into her growing up. So, this is a big thing. She's very insecure. She writes, you were suspicious of their feelings because you had no reason to love yourself, not your body, not your mind. You rejected so much gentleness. What were you looking for? She's desperately wanting to be the object of someone's obsessive desire, but she wasn't sure how to get someone to love her. She writes about a friendship, quote, that she had with an older man, her pastor leader, Joel. At this time, she's 13 and she's very earnest about Jesus and Christianity. She writes, I didn't date when most people dated. When other teenagers were figuring out what good and bad relationships look like, I was busy being extremely weird, praying a lot, getting obsessed with sexual purity. She wore a True Love Waits ring, which didn't we all? Did you have a True Love Waits ring? I did.
Oh yeah, James Avery. I had all that jewelry. Yes.
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 I think both of us understood at an early age, like there was a weight to sex and an importance to it, whether it stemmed from our faith, whether it just stemmed from ourselves. I always sort of registered that it would be a more enjoyable, comfortable experience to lose my virginity to someone who truly loved me, because then I wouldn't be as like judged, I think, about my body.
Mm-hmm.
Why do you think it was so important for you not to have sex in high school?
My abstinence was truly faith-based. It really was. I think I just was never really boy crazy. Like I didn't go through a phase where I was like really needing of male attention. Aside from the faith base of like I'm saving, I'm going to be a virgin until I get married, is that I had a lot of guy friends and I was one of the boys. So they talked to me about
Mm.
sex and all the things they're doing. And to me, it was mortifying. Like I was so embarrassed for the other girls.
Ugh. There you go,
Mm-mm.
parents. There's the key to abstinence for your teenager. Just have them be friends with really gross boys who talk nasty about the girls that
Oh
they're
gosh.
seeing. I feel like we made it through high school relatively unscathed in that regard, which is pretty good because, we had friends who I think maybe not pressured to do things that they weren't quite ready to do. And I feel really fortunate that I never had that pressure put on
Yeah.
me. Okay, so back to Carmen. She starts having feelings for Joel, the pastor. And he definitely took his mentorship of her and their emotional relationship to an inappropriate level.
My goodness. Yeah,
Yeah.
that was
It was
carry
so
on.
inappropriate. She's
It's so inappropriate.
13. It doesn't get physical though. That was my understanding. I
Yeah, no, I think that it was just from how she described it, he just paid special attention to her, one-on-ones in the office, meeting outside of the church and having long, deep conversations with her,
he was
which
talking to her about stuff that was not something that an adult, and because I pictured him, was he in his like mid to late 20s, even early 30s at this point? I'm trying to remember ages. I should have written it down,
I
but
can't remember how old he was, but he
he was
was
married.
definitely, yeah, he was definitely over 18, well over 18.
Yes.
And even if it was an 18-year-old 13-year-old with a 13-year-old is still disgusting.
Yeah, totally. She writes, every night after the campers would go to bed, they're at church camp during this part, I would sit and talk with Joel. He spoke openly, honestly of his faith, how he struggled with his own imperfections, pride and jealousy, and his voice dropping low, lust. It's just kind of like he's like fishing and like he's throwing the bait out there is how I am imagining it.
It's one of those situations again where like as a Christian, it's like, damn it.
I know.
Yet another one. It's like you
Why?
make us look so bad. Like, gosh.
Why are there too many examples of that?
I know.
Too
I
many. I mean,
know.
really. Eventually, he stops communicating with her, and she's left feeling very confused and unwanted. I mean, he really kind of like goes cold turkey on her. And then later, remember, her mom tells her that it had been discovered that he was having an affair with one of the parishioners. He's cheating on his
Yes.
wife. Yeah.
Yes. She grew really close to a pastor who's supposed to serve as like a mentor and a guardian, honestly.
A guardian. Yeah. Yeah.
And I don't want to add intent to it because we don't know his side, but it just feels so manipulative. And luckily, she left, I wouldn't say even unscathed because that can have some emotional and mental,
I
impact.
believe she's very much not unscathed, which is why she brings up this particular story in her memoir.
Well, but
I think it all has something
luckily,
to do with it.
nothing physical happened. Something sexual.
It wasn't physically dramatic. Yeah.
Yeah.
Carmen kind of concludes this section of her memoir with this quote, I wanted to associate sex with something other than fear and guilt. And that really resonated with me. I'm not gonna lie.
Gosh, talk about that Catholic fear and guilt.
Catholic guilt.
Jeez,
I mean, totally though. You're taught for so long that this is a bad thing to do, and that even like inherently as women, we're just like sinners, It's a really hard thing to unlearn. Oh God. Okay, back to Carmen. So she and Dreamhouse Woman are hanging out at her house and they watch The Brave Little Toaster, which that movie is insane. Like, have you tried to watch that movie since childhood?
I've never even heard of this.
You've never heard of The Brave Little Toaster?
No, and you know what? This sounds just as funny. It's like, you've never heard of The Brave Little Toaster? It sounds so ridiculous. It's like when my sister and I were bawling because Bing Bong died in Inside Out. It just sounds so silly.
Excuse me. I don't remember
That's the first one. That's the saddest part. Okay.
Dude, I'm so surprised that you never watched The Brave Little Toaster, though. That is a classic with the lamp. All right, you're coming over and we're watching The Brave Little Toaster.
What is this? Is it a cartoon?
It's a cartoon.
It's gotta be.
It's a cartoon, but it's like a rite of passage cartoon that every child who was a child in the 90s and early aughts watched.
Okay, but what channel is this? A movie
or a movie? You went to Blockbuster, bitch, and you rented it. Okay,
this sounds like are you sure minorities are watching this here?
Carmen Maria Machado. Okay. So she and Dreamhouse watch this movie and they have sex. And Dreamhouse tells her, we can fuck, she says, but we can't fall in love. I feel like that's at the start of every romantic comedy.
Oh my gosh, yes. Yes.
And it almost feels like a challenge, right? Like, don't fall in love with me.
Well, yeah, you just wanna save the bad boy, or in her case, the bad girl who can't love,
But Carmen falls hard, so hard. And so does Dreamhouse Woman. She falls hard for Carmen. Carmen writes, how many times had you said, if I just looked a little different, I'd be drowning in love. Now you get to drown without needing to change one single cell. Lucky you. She kisses your top lip, then the lower one, like each one deserves its own tender attention. She leans away and looks at you with the kind of slow, reverent consideration you'd give to a painting. She strokes the soft inside of your wrist. You feel your heart beating somewhere far away, as if it's behind glass. I can't believe you've chosen me, she says. Earlier, you said that she was not a bad person. She just did bad things. And I think that her abusive tendencies were learned tendencies, as we'll discuss coming up very shortly. But it all feels so perfect.
I think Carmen's coming from a perspective who was insecure, who was never loved the way that she wanted to be, who honestly seemed like she didn't feel like she deserved love. And so here you are with someone telling you these, it's almost like she's just susceptible to this type of relationship because she's hearing all the things she's always wanted to hear. Of
And there are
course, you're going to
no
fall right into it.
Yeah, and there are really no red flags now. Like I don't think the smoking weed thing has happened yet. I mean, it is in the honeymoon stage. It's all
Okay, the
just
red flag is we can fuck, but we can't fall in love. Like, that's
oh,
a red flag,
is
but like,
it? Yeah. Well, she kind of says that because Dreamhouse Woman is actually in a relationship with another woman, but she says that they are open and she wants to move to Iowa to be closer to Carmen. And she applies to Iowa's graduate writing program, but she doesn't get in. Instead, she gets into Indiana's. Val, the other woman that Dreamhouse is dating, is going to move to Indiana to be with her. Val is also open to a polyamorous relationship because Dreamhouse Woman wants to keep dating Carmen as well. So things are going really well between Carmen and Dreamhouse. Their sex is amazing. They are in lust and in love. That's the great place where you want to be, right? Then there's an incident. Carmen and Dreamhouse are working as test graders over the summer, and during a bathroom trip, Carmen gets roped in by a crying woman and stays with her. Dreamhouse is furious that she didn't know where she was. Carmen writes, "Where the fuck were you? You explain about the woman in the bathroom, how you couldn't text because you didn't want to interrupt her. You fully expect this explanation to deflate her rage. You even expect her to apologize, but somehow she gets even angrier. She continues to pound the dashboard. You are the most inconsiderate fucking person I've ever met, and how fucking dare you just walk out of the building with an explanation like that? Don't talk to me like that, you say. Then, horrifyingly, you start to cry. I had to make a decision, and I feel confident that I made the right decision." She unbuckles her seatbelt and leans very close to your ear. "You're not allowed to write about this," she says. "Don't you ever write about this. Do you fucking understand me?" You don't know if she means the woman or her, but you nod. Fear makes liars of us all.
mm,
Oh, and when I read that, I was like, run, Carmen, run.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm. That's
Somebody
just,
shows you who they are, believe them the first time. For her
yeah.
to erupt like that, when Carmen had a very reasonable explanation. She was literally trapped in a bathroom by this woman who was like crying and just wanted somebody to talk to. And there was no way Carmen would have looked like a major bitch if she'd been like, "Excuse me, I have to go tell my girlfriend where I am," you know? At this point, Dreamhouse had been cool and compassionate and kind. Like this was the exact opposite reaction that she expected.
Yeah. I think whatever reason she had is still not enough for her to
Totally.
have that type of reaction. It's like you want to, okay, like I get you have your reactions, but to put it on her, I think it's also the language. With curse words, we like when I'm reading that, I hear her like shouting,
Yeah.
particularly, you know,
Mhm.
and it just feels so aggressive, like
Yes.
very, very aggressive.
And like sharp and like pointed and like it,
Hmm.
yeah. And I love that she included the part where Dreamhouse tells her not to write about her. And then Carmen did. I was like, yeah, you go, Carmen. So Carmen reflects on this in the next section. Dreamhouse is the first woman who wants her in this obsessive way, like she wished for, right? She also remembers how her dad would talk a lot about women's emotions and their sensitivity, and she wonders that maybe she's learning, quote, that lesbian relationships are somehow different, more intense and beautiful, but also more painful and volatile too, because women are all of these things too. She's wading into unknown waters and trying to justify Dreamhouse's behavior because it's love, right? And as she's written many times, she doesn't have any other reference points to read about and to kind of check and be able to say, wait, is this how it is? Is this okay? Where do I go from here?
I mean, I think that's the scary part is, you know, when you don't have an example of what love is, which I think is a very relatable thing, you have to figure that out yourself. And unfortunately for her, her first experience is this.
Yeah.
And it's hard when you don't know what love is and you're trying to define it. And so now her definition of it is slowly enveloping these experiences, which again kind of feeds into why she stayed for so long. It's like when
Yeah.
you equate love to this, then it makes sense in your head somehow.
Yeah. This was just the beginning of Dreamhouse's behavior. There's just more fighting. She makes Carmen cry a lot, but she also makes Carmen feel incredibly seen and incredibly loved. So she does this really good job of showing the duality of their relationship, of the anger. And it feels like there's just this scale. And at one time, like one has more weight than the other. And very quickly, it's constantly changing.
And that's like the definition of a toxic relationship, hot and cold, hot and cold. It's like someone
Yeah.
is, she's at one point, Dreamhouse woman is extremely mean to her. And then the very next minute, she's love bombing her. And this is, I mean, that is literally how toxic relationships are. There's
Yeah,
no
but
in between.
she tries to like convince herself that this is just how it is with another woman too, because women are just more emotional.
And to
Even though
hear her
Carmen herself would never ever treat Dreamhouse this way. It's like, well, wait, if I check myself and I say, like, I would never talk to somebody I love this way.
Well, it's also interesting that she uses stereotypes of women against her own. I mean, that's the stereotype of people think of, oh, what are lesbian relationships like? It must be so emotionally fulfilling because two women, they know what to say to each other, how to feel. And it's just like, that's not necessarily always the case, you know?
Yeah, yeah. And then they go visit Dreamhouse's parents. They spend a lot of time fighting there. At one point, Dreamhouse digs her hand into Carmen's arm, so it gets physical. Carmen addresses it very articulately, might I add. I was honestly, after I read the section, I was a little taken aback and I was like, wow, is she well spoken here? Carmen writes, I need to talk to you, you say. Earlier, when you grabbed my arm, that was so scary. You touched me, and it wasn't with concern or love. You touched me with anger. You feel like a fucking hippie, but you don't know what other language to put to it. The panicked tattoo of your heart. You squeezed, and you lift your arm where you've begun to bruise ever so slightly. Why did you do that? Her expression is flat for half a second before her chin begins to tremble. I'm so sorry, she says. I didn't mean it. You know I love you, right? Carmen writes that it feels like she was just being tested and that she needed to pass all of these tests. Quote, this is how you are toughened. This is where the tenacity of love is practice, its tensile strength, its durability. Sweet girl, sweet self, look how good you are. Look how loyal. Look how loved. She also writes about a poignant moment where Dreamhouse tells Carmen that she doesn't want to be like her verbally and potentially more abusive father, but she worries that sometimes she is. And it just gets so complicated, doesn't it? I mean, it's weird how Dreamhouse almost has these realizations that she's hurting Carmen in a way that she doesn't want to, but yet she can't help but do it. Kind of like a Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde situation, you know? And this also made me think of Joy's memoir when she talks about how she felt like the abuser was a monster and that her husband was separate from the abusive part of him. And that if she could just keep the monster at bay, if she could just keep her husband near, then the abuse would stop or it would go away.
I think it's very common for people to grow up in a household where they're modeled poor behavior. And the innate thing to say is, this is all I know.
Yeah.
There's room for grace for that, but there's also a responsibility on the person, should they be educated or motivated enough to, in a sense, find it in themselves to learn more, because the truth is that really is all they know. So it's not an excuse, but it's a way to understand why they're behaving that way. But I think that that's the hard part, is to add the second part where it's like, well, you got to break the cycle and you have the opportunity to learn new things to know, new ways to
you have
act.
to give yourself that opportunity though. You have to seek it out.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And that's, easier said than done. So it's not like I'm sympathizing with her as an abuser by any means, but it is, I think that's a really common thing, is where that's all you're modeled and it's all you know. And so, I mean, we do things because our brain has processed it so that we don't have to think as much. It's a response. And that's just when you know something, it's automatic, and that's really difficult to unlearn and relearn different attachments and different wirings. So when she says that, I feel like what was sad to me was how long it took Carmen to challenge that, because it seemed like her dream house woman hasn't been fucking challenged. Like,
Agreed.
it's almost like,
Mhm.
this is all I know, I'm sorry. And it's like, okay, the grace is given, no challenge. Like, it's just, there's almost like, because she has a reason for it, it becomes an excuse instead of a motivation to be different.
It's just so weird that she has such a self-aware moment and then
Mm-hmm.
nothing. And then it just falls flat.
Exactly.
Falls flat.
Exactly.
So after this, Dream House gets the Dream House, the house in Indiana, and she asks Carmen to move in with her. She also breaks up with Val at this point to be with Carmen exclusively. Carmen writes, after that, nothing is the same. At first, it does what it is supposed to do, confirm every sneaking suspicion you've had about your own value for so long. You are lucky to have met her. You are not some weird, desperate mess. You are wanted. Better yet, you are needed. You are a piece of someone's destiny. You are critical to a larger plan that will span many years, many kingdoms, many volumes. And this quote is taken from a section that Carmen labeled Dream House as high fantasy. So she has a fantasy and she so desperately wants Dreamhouse Woman to fit into that fantasy.
Mm-hmm.
The first time that someone makes you feel loved and seen and feel so good, you don't want them to be bad. You want them
Yeah.
so desperately to not be bad that you can kind of make them not bad in your mind and in your heart.
Right. And it almost feels like for the first time, it's almost like she's okay to be herself. When in reality, this person isn't allowing her to be herself. Like she's not seeing it, you know?
Yeah,
And if anything, though, because of the love that she receives, it feels as if, wow, someone sees me and loves me. But it's like in so many ways, she doesn't, though.
right. In so many ways, she doesn't. Carmen writes this. Later, you will learn that a common feature of domestic abuse is called dislocation. The victim has just moved somewhere new, or she's somewhere where she doesn't speak the language, or has been otherwise uprooted from her support network, her family and friends, and her ability to communicate. She is made vulnerable by her circumstance, her isolation. Her only ally is her abuser, which is to say, she has no ally at all. And so she has to struggle against the unchangeable landscape that has been hammered into existence by nothing less than time itself. A house that is too big to dismantle by hand, a situation too complex and overwhelming to master on her own. The setting does its work. This is kind of where it all comes to a head. Their relationship continues to not be good. Dreamhouse's behavior escalates. They're on a road trip, and Carmen insists on driving because Dreamhouse is a bad driver. She's speedy, she's reckless. Carmen writes, "Why don't you let me drive?" she asks. Her voice is controlled, measured. "You're tired," she says. "Too tired to drive." "I'm not," you say, and you aren't. "You're too tired and you're going to kill us," she says. The timbre of her voice hasn't changed. "You hate me. You want me to die." "I don't hate you," you say. "I don't want you to die." "You hate me," she says, her voice going up half an octave with every syllable. "You're going to kill us and you don't even care. You selfish bitch. You selfish bitch." She begins to pound the dashboard. "You selfish bitch. You selfish bitch." Carmen pulls the car over and they switch places. Dreamhouse drives even more recklessly than before. Carmen honestly can't be sure that she isn't trying to get them killed, like actively trying to get them killed. Dreamhouse falls asleep at the wheel. She's exhausted, but she won't stop driving. Carmen begs her to stop, but she doesn't listen. And when they finally make it home, Carmen writes, "You could go to bed, or you could sit at the table in the kitchen and watch the scene from behind a window pane. But that, you think, would be like putting this night in a museum. Removed, too soon forgotten. Sit with this, you think. Don't forget this is happening. Tomorrow you will probably push this away. But here, remember. In the morning, the woman who made you feel ill with fear brews a pot of coffee and jokes with you and kisses you and sweetly scratches your scalp like nothing has happened. And as though you'd slept, a new day begins." These examples of just masterful manipulation. Carmen writes that she feels ill all the time. Anxiety is consuming Carmen. She feels lost. During Christmas break, Dreamhouse's verbal abuse is off the charts. She's berating Carmen with insults, telling her she fucking hates her. She screams directly into Carmen's ear. And when Carmen moves off the couch to get away from her, Dreamhouse starts throwing objects at her. Carmen runs into the bathroom and locks the door. Dreamhouse is on the other side of it, still yelling and raging. Carmen writes, "You are there for some time, but you don't have your phone and you can't say how long exactly. Eventually the sounds stop. It is eerily silent. You stand and unlock the door. You come out trembling, crying. She's sitting on the couch, staring into the nothingness like a doll. She turns and looks at you, her face slack. "What's wrong?" she asks. "Why do you look so upset?" More incidents like this one happen. Carmen writes, she blames those nights on a kind of amnesia. You do research while she mopes around. She feels bad, so bad, she says. There is remorse there, true remorse. And yet, sometimes you catch her composing her face into sadness. You want an explanation that clears her of responsibility, that permits your relationship to continue unabated. At night, you lie next to her and watch her sleep. What is lurking inside?
Horror movie.
It is a horror movie. It's Carmen tells Dreamhouse that she has to go to therapy or she'll leave her. She does for a little while, things get better. And then Dreamhouse tells Carmen that she's too busy to continue therapy. She writes, "You remember your promise to leave her if she doesn't get help, but you don't push the issue. You will never talk about it again." Carmen writes this, "In the pit of it, you fantasize about dying, anything to make it stop. You have forgotten leaving is an option." And like the twist I did not see coming, Dreamhouse actually leaves her. She leaves Carmen. She calls one day and says she's in love with someone else. Then she very quickly backtracks and tells Carmen that she thinks they're meant to get through this and not to worry. But then Dreamhouse does eventually officially break up with her. I was so happy for this moment, but Carmen is beside herself. She's heartbroken. She's crying. Her friends keep showing up for her. Of course, Dreamhouse comes back like any good horror movie villain. They always come back that one last time, messaging her, I think I've made a mistake. They meet up. They have great sex. Dreamhouse tells Carmen that the other woman means nothing to her, but yet again flips the script, and finally it is over for good. Carmen writes, "You wonder if you will ever be able to let someone touch you, if you will ever be able to reconnect your brain and body, or if they will forever sit on opposite sides of this new and terrible ravine." Carmen slowly starts to find herself again. She has sex with other people. She reconnects with Val. They both had become friends while dating Dreamhouse. That was who they were in the open relationship with. Carmen writes, "You talk about her, the woman in the dream house, but you also talk about how you were before her and who you are hoping to be after. Eventually, you and Val will come to love each other outside this context. You will move in together, get engaged, get married, but in the beginning, this is what holds you together, the knowledge that they weren't alone." And she doesn't write this, but I mean, I'm assuming that Val was also abused by Dreamhouse. I mean, it's not just something that like she turned on with Carmen.
Yeah, it seemed like, without saying it, that she may have had at least similar
Yeah.
experiences.
Yeah. But I love that Carmen is like, that's not really my story to tell, you
Yeah.
know? And it was nice. Like, we want Carmen to get her happy ending. And it is very ironic that in the end, she comes back to this woman through Dreamhouse.
Yeah.
She writes about being unsure of how and where to end the memoir, and she references a Panamanian folktale that ends with, "My tale goes only to here. It ends, and the wind carries it off." Carmen writes, "It's the only true kind of ending. Sometimes you have to tell a story, and somewhere you have to stop," which I thought was the coolest way for her to end her memoir, because it is hard. It's like, well, her life keeps going, you know?
Right.
But that's not what this book was about. This was about this snippet in time, this journey, why she thinks she got into a relationship like this, and the solidarity that she can offer to other women and people who have gone through this, who are going through this. She can see them and understand them in a way that maybe they're not feeling very seen or understood.
The ending was actually so powerful to me because maybe I'm reading too into it, but it almost felt like there is no ending to this story. This is something she's going to live with forever. This is part of who she is. It doesn't necessarily have to define who she will be, but it is part of who she is. And so there's no ending to this. It's just the ending of this book / chapter of her life and carrying on to what's next. It was kind of nice to see a memoir end that way because I feel like a lot of times it ends where you're just kind of like, they're covering so many different topics and aspects of their life that you're just like, okay, well, then what happens? What happens? And the reality is like, we don't need to know more of what happens here. What's next is, how is she going to deal with that? And how is she going to live on knowing that that is part of what she experienced?
Well said. To me, this memoir is written by someone who just feels life, is sensitive, and does a beautiful job of articulating the human experience. I think that she's a champion for queer women who suffer domestic violence. She's courageous, as you said, to share this story. And I thoroughly enjoyed this memoir and all of the like imaginative ways that she went about getting her point across.
Yeah, I actually, after reading this, it's like, thank you, Carmen. That's all I can say is just thank you. 'Cause even though, not having experienced anything similar to what she has, it really makes you empathize and want to learn more and seek ways to help. And I can imagine that that would be one of the many reasons that she would want to write this.
Yeah. Yeah. Like she said earlier, if you need this book is for you.
Mm-hmm.
I agree. Thank you, Carmen. Thank you for sharing your heart and your story with us. It's not an easy thing to do, and it was done very beautifully. And thank you, Priscilla, for discussing Carmen's In the Dream House with me. I always appreciate our talks. You have such a big heart, even though fortunately this isn't something that we have experienced on our own. It doesn't mean that we don't care about those who have experienced it and want to, in any way, provide a way to help people moving forward.
Yeah, if anything, hopefully other readers are feeling the same way, and together there can be a difference.
All right. Well, I love you. Thank you again for joining me tonight.
Thanks for having me.
Bye, P.
Bye, love you.
Thanks for listening to Babes in Bookland. To access the full version of this episode, you can subscribe on Apple Podcasts or support us on Patreon. Visit babesinbookland.com for more information.